With us now, Bob Woodward of the Washington Post, who's covered Washington scandals going back to Watergate. Good morning.
Morning.
You've also written about the president. How is he handling this, and is there any political fallout?
Not yet, but the question is, how do you inject discipline and accountability into something like this? Maybe you talk to people in the Secret Service, as I have, what confounds them is that there's so many people involved in this. And that clearly is the case. So who else knew? Was this a functioning institution? If you look at how Bob Gates, who is the Secretary of Defense for President Bush and President Obama, when Gates had something like this, like the scandal at Walter Reed, he fired the head of the Army. When the Air Force lost control of some nuclear weapons in a minor way, out was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the Secretary of the Air Force. So sometimes you just have to step in and say leadership requires accountability.
So the president needs to fire Mr. Sullivan in order to...
It would be the Secretary of the Treasury. I'm not saying that they should, but this is not just a little thing. You and I were recalling it was the day Reagan was shot 30+ years ago. You and I were having lunch missing the story. It turns out the story was the Secret Service agents saved Ronald Reagan's life. That was in 1981. If they had not, history would have changed in a way that we can't even comprehend.
And you can understand how the president is sensitive to the fact that these are the people who are willing to take a bullet for him.
Sure, and what I know some Secret Service people, they can be on duty, 20, 30 years and never have that moment of testing. But that moment of testing when you have to take a bullet or think like the agents did involving Ronald Reagan, taking him to the hospital instead of the White House, probably saving his life. Those agents can't be out at the local house of ill repute the night or several nights before.
There's also, Bob, there's the question of the GSA spending spree in Las Vegas, which is, of course, under investigation. And there's been some talk about how both this scandal and the scandal with the Secret Service, how much responsibility actually does fall to the president with either one. How much responsibility is there within the administration?
Well, I mean, the president's ultimately responsible. The question is, does he establish a system of rigid accountability with the cabinet officials or the other agency heads who are responsible here? You just don't know. This is going to, particularly Secret Service investigation, people, your reporter was talking about, is there a culture of acting like sailors in a foreign port in the Secret Service? People deny it, but clearly somebody was not watching the store, and when that happens in government, the people who are in charge have to step in and say, accountability, you're out.
Bob, I want to turn to the economy and the president's handling of the economy, which will be a clear and major issue, if not the biggest issue, in the upcoming presidential campaign. There is debate or discussion as to who was at fault for not having and not succeeded in a grand bargain. Here is what John Boehner said to me in an interview last week.
The president knows that we had an agreement, and they can try to peddle the story any way they want. But we had an agreement until the president decided to violate the agreement and ask for $400 billion in higher taxes. It wasn't about my members. It wasn't about the votes. I was willing to risk my speakership to make this happen because I thought it was the right thing for the country. And I would go to the table and go at this again, because America cannot continue to go down this path of this spiraling debt crisis it's almost like a wet blanket that's hanging over the economy.
There's the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Tell me how you see this and how this emerging issue of the economy will play out, and whether the president is right or is the Speaker right in terms of the failure to have Washington do something constructive about the economy?
Well, first of all, the Speaker's right that this is a wet blanket hanging over everything. They haven't fixed it. And I'm writing a book about President Obama and his management of the economy, and I have the luxury of time to dig in and try to find out exactly what happened. I think the bottom line in the impact here is, as the Speaker has said, as the President knows, we're on a spending spree. And at the end of the year, taxes are going to go up for everyone, taking money out of the economy. It's something that has not been repaired. And look at Europe, look at what's going on in the global economy. It is very fragile, and this can go off a cliff in a moment.
Let me finally turn to the news of the death of Chuck Colson. He's one of the people that was central to Watergate and then had a different life after that. Remember him for us.
Colson was one of Nixon's hatchet men. He was, he was the most aggressive in doing lots of these things. At the same time, when Colson went to prison, he experienced, I think, a really genuine conversion and devoted himself to prisoners and prison reform in a way that you can't question, because you talk to people in the prison reform movement, and Chuck Colson is a god. And so we have the two sides of this man, the guy who said and acted like he would walk over his grandmother to get Nixon reelected, but somebody devoting decades to a very worthy cause.
Thank you, Bob.